They saw the curls, the worn-out hoodie, and the coffee cup in her hand. To them, she was just another black lady walking down a street that, in their minds, didn't belong to her. They stopped her, dismissed her, mocked her. But in less than 9 minutes, those same officers would be pleading, not just for her forgiveness, but for her help. Because behind the tired eyes and quiet demeanor was a name they hadn't bothered to ask. And that name was the only thing standing between them and disaster. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you don't want to miss what happens next. Trust me, this gets incredible. It started at 6:13 a.m. The sun hadn't fully risen, and I was heading home from the hospital after a double shift in the ER. I had one earbud in, half listening to a podcast, and I was tapping through emails when I felt the cruiser slow beside me. "Excuse me, the officer called out. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. We'll need to see some ID." Suspicious. I blinked. I was wearing scrubs. My badge was literally clipped to my front pocket. "I just got off a 16-hour shift," I said calmly. "I'm a trauma surgeon at County General." He looked past me. Didn't even glance at the ID. The second officer stepped out of the vehicle, hand already resting on his belt. "We're not here to argue. Just do what you're told." My heart didn't race. It hardened. I'd had this happen before, but never this close to something so critical. Because what they didn't know was that a VIP federal security alert had just been issued downtown. I had just received it. And I, Dr. Maya Bennett, was the on-call medical consultant for the emergency response team. In fact, their precinct was the target, and I was the one sent to warn them. The taller officer kept his hand on his belt like I was about to pull something more dangerous than a hospital ID. The other moved in closer, trying to assert control. I could feel the tension rise, but I didn't have time for this. "Officers," I said firmly, lifting my phone, "you need to listen to me. A level red federal alert just went out. Your precinct is the target. I was assigned to coordinate emergency medical readiness. You are burning precious seconds." They blinked, but didn't move. One of them actually scoffed. "Right. And I'm the president." That's when I made the call, not to back down, but to activate the direct DHS line. I hit the code. The line rang once before it was picked up. "Dr. Bennett. Are you in position?" "Almost. I'm being detained. Local officers don't recognize me." "Put them on. Now." I handed the phone to the officer. He took it reluctantly, rolling his eyes, until he heard the voice on the other end. His entire posture changed. Shoulders stiffened. Mouth slightly open. His hand dropped from his belt like it had been burned. "Yes, sir. Yes. No, we weren't aware." He passed the phone to his partner, who went pale halfway through the conversation. 9 minutes. That's how long it took to go from being ignored to having them scrambling to escort me to my destination like their lives depended on it, because, truthfully, they did. When we arrived at the precinct, it was chaos. Evac orders were going out. Officers and admin staff were rushing down the stairs. The commanding sergeant met me with a clipboard in one hand and panic in his eyes. "Dr. Bennett. Thank God you made it. Do we have trauma staging ready?" The two officers who stopped me. They stood to the side, sheepish, watching as I coordinated evacuation zones, triage locations, and medical readiness. They didn't say a word, until I turned to leave. "Doctor," I corrected. "Right. Doctor. We're sorry." I paused. Looked them both in the eye. "You saw a black woman with a phone. Not the surgeon sent to save your station." I didn't wait for a response. The news broke before I got home. Anonymous medical hero averts police station tragedy. Female doctor thwarts attack with federal team. Black woman profiled by police, saves same department hours later. But they didn't know my name. Not yet. I watched from my apartment couch, still in scrubs, my shoes by the door, and a cold bowl of oatmeal on the table. My phone buzzed non-stop, the hospital, government officials, even the mayor's office. But not the officers who stopped me. 2 days later, I got a call from the Deputy Commissioner. Dr. Bennett, we'd like to formally recognize you for your service during the precinct alert. There will be a press event. We'd be honored to have you speak. I almost said no. Not out of pride. Out of exhaustion. Out of the quiet anger that I, a black woman with decades of expertise, had to prove my worth in an emergency just to be seen. But then I thought, what if I said it out loud? On their stage. In front of their cameras. At the ceremony, the hall was filled with officers, politicians, reporters. The two who had stopped me. Front row. Eyes locked on me. I stepped up to the MIC. I didn't come here for applause. I didn't act out of ego. I acted because that's what I was trained to do. But make no mistake, I was profiled. You didn't see a surgeon. You didn't see a crisis responder. You saw someone who didn't look like she belonged. There was silence. Some shifted in their seats. But most stayed still. So the next time you see a black woman walking with purpose, don't ask her to prove herself. Just ask her name. Applause broke out. But it wasn't for me. It was for truth. The ceremony ended, but the impact didn't. I didn't go straight home. I took a detour, past the station, past the hospital, to a quiet cafe where I could breathe. But even there, people whispered. Some stared. Others nodded with quiet respect. Are you the doctor from the news? I always smiled gently. Yes. But I've always been that doctor. You just noticed me now. A week later, I was called into a private meeting at City Hall. Not for a thank you. For a proposal. Dr. Bennett, the commissioner said, we want your help restructuring our officer training program. Bias, crisis response, cultural competency. You'd lead it. From the ground up. For a moment, I sat in silence. You mean, fix the system that nearly cost lives because I didn't look like a savior? He cleared his throat. Yes, because next time, we may not be so lucky. I took the offer, not for them, but for the women who come after me. For every young black girl with ambition in her chest and the world telling her she needs to be smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. Weeks later, I stood in front of a room of new recruits. Fresh uniforms. Eager eyes. Some skeptical. I held up a photo, me, that morning, standing in scrubs outside their station. Stopped, questioned, doubted. You see this woman? I asked. A few nodded. She saved your precinct. But 9 minutes earlier, no one here would have believed her. I let the silence settle. So if you remember nothing else from this training, remember, power doesn't always look like you expect. Sometimes it wears old sneakers and carries a badge you didn't bother to read. They didn't just thank me. They followed me. For weeks after that courtroom-like morning in front of the precinct, my inbox filled with requests, interviews, consultations, even speaking engagements. The city wanted to turn me into a symbol. But I wasn't interested in being anyone's poster child. I wanted change. Permanent change. A lieutenant named Ramirez approached me 2 days later. Mid-40s. Hispanic. Stiff posture. You could see he still wasn't sure how to look me in the eye, not because of disrespect, but because of regret. We reviewed the footage, he said. You asked to help within the first 20 seconds. We ignored you for 8 minutes and 47 seconds after that. He paused. Swallowed. That's inexcusable. I nodded. Not the first time. But maybe the last, if you let me help. By the following Monday, I was standing in front of a projector in a training room filled with skeptical officers. All of them armed. All of them watching me, a woman in plain clothes, with degrees instead of badges. I didn't flinch. Before you see my slides, I said, I want you to understand this. I didn't save that man despite being black. I saved him because of it. The room stiffened. When the world trains you to listen to sirens but ignore voices like mine, you miss the very people who can save you. The system's broken. But I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to rewire how you think, so next time, you see a black woman in scrubs and think ally, not intruder. At the end of the seminar, one of the officers stood up. The same one who'd first dismissed me that morning. The one who called me like it was a warning, not a sign of respect. He stepped forward. His voice cracked. "Dr. Bennett. I was wrong." I nodded, silent. "Please. Help us do better." And just like that, they begged. Not for mercy. For guidance. It started with one precinct. Then two. By month's end, I was consulting for 5. Not as a guest. Not as a figurehead. As an architect of reform. I created a program called Proximity Readiness. Not just about protocol, but presence. Empathy. Response under pressure. It included real-world simulations featuring black and brown professionals. De-escalation exercises designed by trauma psychologists. Unfiltered video testimonials from civilians, some of whom were nearly statistics. I didn't just bring them lectures. I brought them truth. It's not about politics, I told them. It's about protection of all citizens, regardless of what they wear, how they speak, or the shade of their skin. And for once, they didn't argue. One morning, I received a letter, gold seal, embossed emblem. From Senator Halliday. "Dr. Maya Bennett. Your leadership has sparked measurable change within our public safety system. The Judiciary Committee invites you to speak at our upcoming hearing on community equity and emergency response." That was the day I realized. They finally heard me, because I stopped waiting to be introduced. I'd introduced myself. I didn't want a statue. I didn't want a holiday. But the moment that meant the most came quietly, in the hospital. A young black girl, no older than 9, watched me walk down the hallway in my white coat. She gripped her mother's hand and asked, "Is she the lady from the news?" The mother smiled. "Yes, baby. She's the one who made them listen." The girl beamed. "I want to be just like her." And in that moment, justice wasn't just served. It was planted. The media dubbed me the angel in scrubs. It made headlines. Nice for newspapers. But it wasn't the truth. I wasn't an angel. I was a black woman who had to be twice as qualified, 3 times as calm, and 1,000 times more prepared just to be seen as capable. They doubted me long before that 9-minute miracle. They doubted me in med school. In residency. At every board meeting where I was the only woman, the only black face, or both. One evening, I got invited to a public hero panel on a major news network. 5 seats. For men in crisp suits. And me, in my white coat. The moderator turned to me with a polite smile. "Dr. Bennett, did you always know you were meant to be a hero?" I looked at him. Calm. Clear. "No. I always knew I had to be better than good, or no one would listen until something burned." The room fell silent. I continued. "The real question isn't how I saved that man. It's why I had to fight through a wall of doubt just to be allowed to try." The shift wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. But real. Policymakers asked for my notes, and actually read them. Police departments reached out before disasters, not after. Medical institutions began building racial bias response drills into their emergency room training. And the next time a woman who looked like me arrived at a crisis scene, they didn't stop her at the door. They stepped aside. What I learned through it all is this. Power doesn't always come with a badge or a title. Sometimes it wears scrubs. Sometimes it wears scars. Sometimes it walks into a room full of disbelief. And refuses to shrink. I didn't save that day because I was special. I saved it because I refused to stay silent when I knew I was needed. It didn't happen overnight. The first time I spoke at the state emergency board meeting, only 3 people showed up on time. One kept checking his phone. Another left halfway through. But I spoke anyway. Because that's what we do, people like me. We speak whether they listen or not. Weeks later, I got a call. "Dr. Bennett, we'd like you to train the governor's crisis response unit." I paused. Not because I was surprised, but because they finally used my full name. No miss, no nurse, no assumptions. "Thank you," I said. "What changed?" The woman on the phone laughed softly. "You did. And now, we're catching up." In less than a year, the reform pilot I co-wrote was active in 3 major cities. Police recruits were now graded on cultural intelligence, not just target range. Hospitals included bystander collaboration protocols in trauma drills. One department installed a new policy. If a civilian with verified medical training offers assistance, officers must defer or collaborate, not obstruct. It wasn't about me. It was about who came after me. The next time I walked into that same police precinct, no flashing lights, no emergency, every officer in the room stood up. One of them, the youngest, stepped forward. Nervous. "Dr. Bennett, I used your field guide last week. Helped me de-escalate a domestic situation. No one got hurt." He smiled. "Thank you for teaching us what the job actually means." That was the moment I knew. They weren't just listening. They'd started learning. One morning, I opened an envelope. No return address. Just 3 words on the back. "Because of you." Inside, a handwritten note from a girl named Alana, 17 years old, a senior in Detroit. They laughed when I said I wanted to be a trauma surgeon. My counselor said to aim for something more realistic. "Then I saw the video of you in the courtroom, the way you didn't flinch when they looked shocked to see you take control. I replayed that scene where you said, 'I may be overlooked, but I am never unqualified.' I memorized it. Said it in the mirror. Thank you. I'm applying to med school next fall." I held that letter to my chest like it was sacred. Because it was. I later found out the letter had been passed hand to hand through volunteers, not through any organization, not through PR. Just people. People moved. People changed. I heard of officers transferring to divisions focused on community healing. Of medical schools inviting cultural historians to lecture alongside surgeons. Of precincts now pairing every rookie with a civilian mentor, someone from the community they patrol. These weren't headlines. But they were history. At first, they said I was emotional. Then they called me passionate. Finally, they called me right. But here's what I've learned. Change doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it echoes, in classrooms, in clinics, in quiet lives rising. I didn't set out to be anyone's role model. I set out to save a life. But along the way, something bigger happened. I became proof that being overlooked is never the same as being powerless. The man I saved that day, the one they thought I had no business touching, no right to command attention for, was now standing on a stage, under a spotlight, beside me. It was the state's highest civilian honor for emergency response. It had only ever gone to men. Most of them in uniform. All of them white. When they announced I'd be receiving it, someone on the board suggested the name be updated to something more inclusive. I declined. "Let it stay the same," I said. Because I didn't need the name to change. I needed the meaning to. And that night, the meaning did. As the man I saved took the MIC, he was nervous. He stumbled through a few words, cleared his throat. "I judged her," he admitted. "I saw her skin and her stance and assumed nothing important could follow. I was wrong. And I will never forget the 9 minutes that rewrote everything I thought I knew about power, race, and grace." He was sincere. But that wasn't the moment that stuck with me. It came after the applause. As the ceremony ended, I stepped outside for air. A little black girl in a yellow dress stood near the exit, clutching a notepad. Her mother gently pushed her forward. "I watched the video," the girl said, almost whispering. "The one where they told you to stay back, but you didn't. I told my teacher I want to be like that. Like, strong like that." I kneeled and smiled. "You already are." This story started with judgment. It sparked with disbelief. It caught fire with truth. But it didn't end with that courtroom. Or the cameras. Or the applause. It continues wherever someone underestimated refuses to stand down. Wherever courage isn't loud, but firm. Wherever the world says wait your turn, and someone says, no. It's now. This was never about me. It's about what happens when we stop asking for permission, and start taking our place. The end.